Hello, good morning. My name is Brian Dickinson. You might have seen me before. I'm the history teacher, teaching you about the Cold War, history of the Cold War. I'm a history teacher down in West Sussex. Today's lesson is about the Berlin Wall. So last lesson was about the Hungarian uprising, which is in 1956. And this one is about the early 1960s, 61, when the Berlin Wall gets built. So what I'm going to do now is to share with you my PowerPoint, and then we can get on to the lesson, go through the lesson together today. Okay, bear with me. Yeah, I'll do that. One. Right, bear with me. Okay, so we're looking at the construction of the Berlin Wall, and how and where it was built. Now, some of the reasons why it was built, or some of the facts about the Berlin Wall being built. Okay, between 1949 and 61, 4 million East Germans fled to the West, mainly because of a better standard of living and better job prospects and things like that. In 1958, Khrushchev, who was the leader of the Soviet Union at the time after Stalin, issued his famous Berlin ultimatum. He gave the Allies 6 months to leave Berlin. He didn't like this brain drain of really good workers and really good people leaving the East to the West. By January 61, a number of East Germans fleeing was about 20,000 a month. In June 61, at the Vienna summit, this is like a conference they had, Khrushchev again demanded Western forces leave Berlin. On August 13th, 1961, Khrushchev closed the border between East and West Berlin, literally closed it. Couldn't go through, okay? Weren't allowing people to go through. After the border was closed, streets and buildings nearby were demolished so barbed wire fences could be erected. Even though quite often, and you see in the history of the wall, some of it were very, very near to some buildings anyway. A barbed wire fence, which was built, was over 27 miles long, separated East and West Berlin. It went all the way around West Berlin. Okay, it wasn't just a wall in between two places, it was literally all the way around. After the barbed wire fence was built, construction was on the wall began. So initially it was barbed wire, and there was a bit of a no man's land in between, and then they started to literally build a proper wall. So it's a concrete wall. That took some time. Whilst the wall was being built, areas were cleared so East German guards could shoot anyone who tried to cross. So they, whereas before you could go across it quite happily, and some people decided not to come back, they literally just stopped people going. They stopped people leaving, and people were shot, and some people were killed. The USA and its partners did nothing to stop construction of the wall. This is important, and we'll come to this a bit later on. Eventually, a more permanent wall was built, and so it did become a permanent structure. Anyway, we'll come on to that a bit later. The final wall was 3.6 meters high and 1.2 meters wide, making it very difficult to climb over and escape. And there was a bit of a no man's land in between the two as well. So it wasn't just a wall. The area beyond the wall was even harder to cross. The soldiers patrolled with dogs, also floodlights and wire trip machine guns as well. So it was heavily guarded. Some people didn't make it. It was heavily graffitied with messages on the western side. Some wrote messages of peace, love and hope. So if you ever see a piece of the wall today, there's loads of graffiti all over it, okay? And that's because that's what it was like at the time. In fact, if you go to the Imperial War Museum in London, there's a piece of the wall standing outside. It's a big chunk of it, about sort of like a metre and a half wide and back, wherever it was, tall, 3.6 metres tall, and it's got graffiti all over it. Most of these, in fact, so you won't get asked in an exam. You won't get asked how tall it is or how long it was or anything like that. But you would get asked maybe why they built it. Okay, the information about this particular incident is about why they built it. And there's a sort of like section of it that you can see. This is what it's like if you go to Berlin today and you see sections like this around. Okay. So what you got to think about when you're doing this in an exam when it comes up is why it was built and the impact it had. Okay, so one of the things. So what were the impacts of the building the Berlin Wall? Now, one thing you might want to do in a minute is when I brought this up, if you're watching this on a video, is to stop it afterwards, and you might want to sort the impacts into impacts on Germany, impacts on the USSR, and impacts on the superpower relations, and also maybe what was the most important impact of the construction. So, and that'll make it more sense in a minute when I bring them up. Okay, but escape from East Germany becomes almost impossible. So they literally, people living in East Germany couldn't get out. Okay, families were split up and communicating was difficult because of travel constrictions. So literally families, say between 1961 and 89, they didn't see each other. And communicating was very, very difficult. Some families, not all. Khrushchev felt he had outmaneuvered Kennedy and won. But he felt as if he got his own way, basically, on this one. Kennedy and Khrushchev communicated to remove the troops, but they didn't. USSR stationed troops and tanks on the eastern side. So a lot of the troops who were on the eastern side were Russian troops, okay, Soviet troops, not always German troops, they were Soviet troops. And if you go there today, especially certain parts of it, like Checkpoint Charlie, which was one of the main checkpoints, it's a bit of a tourist trap now, it's awful. You can buy like Russian hats and things like that there. The building of the wall ensured that peace was maintained, but at a higher price. And we'll come on to that in a minute, okay? One of the good things about it, I suppose, in some respects. Americans stationed their own troops and tanks on the western side, and that's something you see an element of today if you go to Berlin today. Some Germans felt let down as the USSR had broken the 1949 agreement and the USA did not go to war. So a lot of the East Europeans felt as if they were being kind of abandoned, really, being let down, that they weren't really been looked after and been forgotten about. The Berlin Wall became a symbol of the Cold War and division of the world, which is why when it came down in 1989, it was a massive sort of celebration because it really became a symbol and a byword for the Cold War. Okay, the wall did reduce tensions. Now that Berlin was divided and the borders closed, there was less likelihood that the US and the USSR would go to war over Berlin. Kennedy said a war was better than a war. So one thing about that is that it kind of made it's resolved to a certain extent the Berlin question about what we're going to do at Berlin. It became right, okay, it's now permanent. People are not leaving, which Stalin used to get very upset about. You weren't leaving loads of highly skilled people weren't leaving the east to the west because they had more money. I mean, for example, in the I think it was one of the university in Berlin. In 1 week, once the whole maths department left and went to the west. The whole maths department at the university left because they earned more money. They had a better standard of living. So if you were skilled, you could leave. And of course, by building the wall, making it permanent, it kind of resolved that question. That, you know, Stalin was no longer unhappy about losing people, but it kind of it made it permanent. So at least it was permanent. People knew where they were going to be, and it didn't really become a flashpoint or a problem after that, but it did become a symbol. So going back to the tasks, if you want to do a task, if you look at a thing you might do in a lesson, is to sort those impacts into what impacted on Germany, what impacted on the Soviet Union, what impacted on the relationship between the two. Okay, and maybe in an exam you might get asked, I'll come on to the exam bit in a minute, what was the most important? Well, you won't get asked what was most important, but it's a good idea to get into your head. Try to make, one thing that history examiners like, and I'm a history examiner, is to get good grades, get the grade 6 and the 7s and 8s really, or 7s and 8s definitely, is that if you say which impact is more important and why. Okay, it doesn't matter which one you pick. Don't get too worried about, oh, is it this one or is it that one? It doesn't matter. Historians disagree all the time. Even at, you know, like professor level, they disagree. At GCSE level, it doesn't matter. Is how you come to that conclusion. That's what examiners are looking for. Why are you saying that? Are you backing it up? If you just say the most important impact was it maintained peace at a higher price. Say why you think that. Don't just say that. Okay, so it's what's called a developed answer. Anyway, to carry on. Even though JFK kind of, to a certain extent, lost this argument, he felt as if he had to go to Berlin to make himself look a bit better. And so that's what he did. Berlin Wall became a symbol of the Cold War and the division between East and West. He visited in 1963. Okay, when he visited West Berlin, he went on a 30-mile tour of the streets. This is in West Berlin, obviously. He was treated like a rock star or sporting hero, with flowers and crowns chanting his name. West Berliners were celebrating their freedom, because they knew that they were safe now, I suppose. And Kennedy praised the freedoms of the West in contrast to the East. He spoke to a crowd of 200,000 people in Central Sea. You go on YouTube, this is on YouTube, you can go on YouTube and watch it. It's actually thousands and thousands of people come out to see him. Some East Berliners were able to hear the event. Obviously, if you were right near that part of the wall, you could hear it. And this is where he made his famous speech where he says, "Ich bin ein Berliner," which means I am a Berliner. So he stood with this, I'm with you on this. If it's on YouTube, you can go and see it on YouTube and see it. That's Kennedy there. So, and this is what he actually famously said, or some of what he said. While the wall is the most obvious and vivid demonstration of the failures of the communist system, we take no satisfaction in it. It is, as your mayor has said, an offence not only against history, but an offence against humanity. Freedom has many difficulties and democracy is not perfect, but we have never had to put a wall up to keep people in, to prevent them from leaving us. There are many people in the world who really don't understand, or say they don't, what is the great issue between the free world and the communist world. Let them come to Berlin. Today, in the world of freedom, the proudest boast is, ich bin ein Berliner, I'm a Berliner. So what he's trying to say there is, obviously, is that, you know, democracy and the capitalist system is not perfect, but we don't build a wall to keep people in. If people want to leave, if they want to go anywhere in the world, they can go. Doesn't mean you'll get into where you want to go, but you can leave it. Okay, some of the things that like I'll try to help you with a little bit about the impacts and some of the ways that you might want to come about is good and bad outcomes. Negative outcomes for USSR. Khrushchev had to abandon plans to unite Germany under Soviet control. So he knew then now he can't unite Germany and Berlin. Sorry, he couldn't unite Germany or Berlin at all. He had to abandon that. The wall showed that the USSR had to lock people into East Germany to stop them leaving. So given a clear choice, people chose living in the West over living in the East. Positive outcome for the USSR, the wall stopped refugees leaving. So this brain drain of skilled workers stopped, it dried up. It sent a message that communism would survive in Berlin, that any attempt to reunite Germany under Western control would fail. Kennedy had shown weakness by allowing the wall to be built. This gave Khrushchev confidence. So he felt as if, Khrushchev felt as if he won this argument. The negative ones for the USSR, the negative outcomes for the USA. The USSR had closed the border without consulting the USA. It just did it overnight, virtually. Those people wanted to escape communism were no longer able to. So it did split people up. It did split families up. Positively for the USA, the wall showed that Khrushchev had been forced to accept Western control. So in some respects, you know, the fact that the Western people weren't kicked out and they were permanently going to be there was quite a good thing, I suppose. And West Berlin became an emblem of freedom and defiance against communism. It was a better standard of living, a better place to be, really, if you want to go and live in Berlin. The West was much better. In terms of the outcomes of international relations, this is what the whole course is about, the bit that you're doing the GCSE on, things had got so bad that over Germany, an actual concrete wall had to be built dividing it. So it did become it was a bit of a flashpoint between the two, bit of an argument between the two sides. So building a wall kind of negatively, you know, they had to build a wall. They couldn't resolve it in any other way. It was a powerful symbol of division between East and West. Troops remained in Berlin right up to 1989. This is why, if you watch any newsreel, none of you would remember this. I remember this very, very, very well. Is that when the wall did finally come down, people literally pulled it down and got on it and smashed it, and was people singing on it, and it was a fireworks going off and everything. Positively, the wall became actually helped reduce tensions. Now the wall was up, and there was less likelihood that the USA and USSR would go to war over Berlin. Kennedy said that war was better than war. The number of military alerts in Berlin declined. So it kind of settled that argument. Okay, so in one respect, don't forget, up till this point, it was kind of building up and building up. So don't forget, you know, it kind of resolved it a little bit as well. Some of the questions that you might have got in a lesson: it was accused of being soft on Berlin. Do you agree? What was meant by being soft? Who do you think won the Berlin crisis? So quite often this is called a Berlin crisis. Okay, in the exam it's called the Berlin crisis. It is not, I repeat, not the Berlin airlift and blockade, or blockade and airlift. So there's two different events. The Berlin blockade, the Berlin airlift is one event in 1948-49. This is the Berlin crisis about the war. People do get them, students do get them confused. Did the Berlin crisis increase or decrease tensions? To some extent, you can say it decreased. Okay, but you've got to explain why it decreased. I'm not going to go through a lot of this for you because there's an awful lot of information about how to answer an exam question, because I think it would just take actually too long. One of the things is that you get an exam question like this. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. Is explain the importance of X for Y. So, for example, on question 3 on your exam, explain the importance of building the Berlin Wall for the development of the Cold War. Explain the importance of the events of Hungary, 56, for the development of the Cold War. Explain the importance of a summit conference for the problem of Berlin, okay? And you have to choose 2 of those. So in an exam, it'll look like this. You get 3 questions and you have to choose 2 of them. And it's for 16 marks, only 8 marks each. The question is looking at consequence and significance. How important was that particular event? So when you're looking at the importance of the Berlin Wall for the development of the Cold War, you're looking at what was the consequences of it and why was it important, okay? And if you're looking at Hungary, what was the consequences of Hungary and why was that an important event? That's what you've got to answer, okay? Do not, as a lot of people do, say, oh, look, yeah, building the Berlin Wall. I know all about that. I could talk about the building the Berlin Wall. It's not about that. Or you see Hungary, you see a question about, oh, I've seen so many students do this. I know about Hungary. And they talk about what happened in Hungary. They talk about the event of the Hungary uprising. That's not what the question's about. The question's about what came out of it, what are the consequences, and what is the significance of the event. Okay, I will do other lessons on exam questions. Okay, I've had a chat with Satchel or show my homework, and I have. I want to do some lessons on actually how you write an exam answer and how you look at them. So another question you will get is write a narrative account analysing the main events of East-West rivalry. Okay, you may use some of the following, which means you should do. So that's kind of one of the questions that you get. A narrative event. It's not. I've seen, believe me, I've seen people do this. I think narrative, that's a story, and they write a story. I've even seen students go, I was walking down the road, blah, blah, and it's like, what are you talking about? And they think they're writing a story. It's not. It's about telling it in chronological order. So I want to do some more lessons. Hopefully you'll come along to them. Some of the pictures of the Berlin Wall coming down. Okay, November '89. Because it was a very joyous occasion and people smashed bits of it up and everything else. And if you go there now, the pictures on the right are parts of the wall which are kind of still standing. They're more monuments, and you've got information in between each slab. And if you look on the picture on the left, you've got those bricks in the wall, in the floor, sorry, that shows you where the wall was. so you can almost walk around it in the whole of Berlin. And there are museums to do with it as well. You can't really escape the fact that there was a war once in Berlin. There's still very nice parts of Berlin, but there are parts of it which you can go around and think, oh yeah, this is where it was. If you ever get a chance to go to Berlin, go. It's brilliant. It's a lovely, lovely city. It's really easy to get around. The tube section they've got there is really good. So what I'm going to do is to stop sharing. Come back to me. Okay, that's today's lesson. I hope it was okay. Any problems on previous emails, on the previous lessons I've done, I've put my email, I forgot to do it today, on my PowerPoint, so please email me any questions. I need help. If you want any help, if you want to answer some questions, you want someone to look at it and read it, I will quite happily do that for you. I've got a website which is also on my previous PowerPoints, and have a look at that and come along and you can ask me questions, anything like that at all. No problem at all. Hope to see you again soon. Anyway, have a good day.